Hey there and welcome. Welcome to Leadershipization, all things leadership. Look, I really hope if you're not still relaxing at home, I really hope that you've had a chance to relax, to refresh, and to recalibrate over the Easter long weekend. It really is a time of renewal and a time of reflection. So I hope that you've had an opportunity to do that. Today, what I want to explore is a leadership experience that um, lots of capable people recognize, but it's not something that we talk about particularly openly. And that is that you can be respected, you can feel respected in your workplace, but you still feel that people aren't quite fully behind you. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, yeah, they listen when you speak. Yes, they acknowledge your experience. And yes, they agree with you in meetings. However, once a decision's made, it seems to lose momentum and initiatives seem to lose their energy pretty quickly. And any kind of alignment that you're feeling feels a bit more polite than it does really powerful. And perhaps you in your leadership role can't quite explain what's missing. And this is because it's not actually about competence or authority, it's about this one quiet leadership blind spot, which is the gap between being intellectually respected and being genuinely trusted enough for people to actually commit to you. Yep, that should have landed. And the leaders who learn to close this gap, that gap between being intellectually respected and being genuinely trusted enough for people to commit, the leaders who learn to close that gap, they get backing, they get ownership, and they get real follow through on top of the agreement that they might be getting from their team. I'm Beth Bergen. I'm a global leadership communication coach, and I'd love it if you join me as we explore this topic. So, before we look at how to strengthen backing, what we need to do is we actually need to understand why the gap forms in the first place. Because in most cases, it's not created by something that the leader might lack, it's created by strengths that we over rely on. So often we are sabotaged not by things that we lack, but by strengths that we over rely on or overuse. So, our first talking point today is this: intellectual credibility creates distance when it's not balanced with human connection. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, as humans, we defer to expertise. We defer to it like they're the expert. Oh, you're the doctor. Oh, you're the leader. You're the person who's the authority here. However, we actually there's a further step that's required for us to fully commit. So we're deferring to the expertise. We commit when we feel psychologically safe. So what we need to be aware of is that when people are impressed by our intellectual ability, when they're impressed by our competence, that high competence can actually unintentionally create intimidation. Now, you're not setting out to intimidate anybody, but because they're looking and thinking, ooh, really good, really, really good at this, then that can create that sense of intimidation without you even realizing it. Now, when our teams, and what happens here is that our teams seem to be agreeing with us on an external basis, but internally, there's been no human connection. And so they're actually disagreeing with us. And when this happens, when we don't have them fully backing us, we get compliance. They do what they need to do only when they need to do it. So we have that compliance, top marks for that. We don't have a sense of ownership, because in order to have that sense of ownership, we've got to build that psychological safety. We also need to have that human connection. We've got to build that relational trust that's so important for psychological safety. And what will happen is that your team will follow you when they give themselves emotional permission, not just that logical agreement. So that's the beginning of closing that gap that I was talking about earlier. You've got to combine your competence with some human connection. Number 2, leaders who move fast can actually leave that alignment behind. Now, that's kind of a fancy way of saying, hey, if you're moving really fast, if you're an experienced leader and you are a quick thinker, you're bouncing all over the place. This is something that I have to be really careful of. I'm bouncing all over the place with my thinking. And what that means is that perhaps you, and I certainly know in my case, I'm jumping to solutions when others are still kind of processing them. They're still thinking about what might be possible, and you're over here telling them what is going to be possible. Now, this speed gap is really what opens the door for lots of misinterpretation. And in some cases, even though they've sat there while your thinking has bounded ahead, some people perceive this as a lack of consultation, which means that they might respect the decision, but there's no ownership because they don't feel as though they're actually part of it. So thinking quickly and bringing that solution up too quickly can turn your team away from you. That alignment that we're talking about, that's not built at the pace of the fastest thinker. So if as a leader you're thinking that you need to be a fast thinker and move things really quickly, what I would recommend is that you look at slowing that down so that you are moving at the pace of others. Now, this can be frustrating. I understand that. But we're looking for that human connection so that people are fully behind you. And so this is about you changing the way that you're managing these conversations. The third thing is this shifting. This is all about you actually shifting your belief that your value comes from being right. It's about shifting your belief that your value comes from being right. Now, it's really easy to build an entire career on being the person who had the answer. Oh, I know what we need to do here. This is awesome. And what can happen when our identity is wrapped around being the one with the answer is that we can move into a space where letting others shape thinking, waiting for others to catch up with you, waiting for others to put their ideas forward, that can feel really inefficient. That can feel really inefficient. And so what happens is that over time, if we're the person who believes that we are right all the time, we establish this kind of subtle hierarchy in our team, which points to the fact that my ideas, they are always the best. And so we're actually saying to people, you don't need to put your ideas forward because my ideas are actually the best and they're the ones that we're going to go with. So be aware that your influence will deepen when you and your team is more likely to get behind you when you shift your identity and you move from that identity of the answer provider to becoming what I would call a thinking partner. So this is all about, we've talked about how what got you here won't get you there. This is about you looking and thinking, oh, am I running around here telling everyone all the time, behaving as though I'm going to be the answer provider? Do I have that identity? And if so, what would it take to shift me and my behaviors so that I can become a thinking partner for my team? Because it's all about building their capability. Yeah. Point 4 for us today is this: predictability builds trust much more than brilliance does. Predictability builds trust more than brilliance. Teams trust leaders who are emotionally consistent, not just those people who are brilliant or strategically capable. And if what you're doing is demonstrating these sudden shifts in your tone, in your priorities, in your expectations, all of those things create uncertainty. Now, we've talked a lot about that with the various subjects that we've looked at over the last few weeks and months of Leadershipization, All Things Leadership. So if you want to dig down into that any deeper, it's worth your while to go back and have a look at some of the other topics that we've covered over the last month, because this has been a really big one. Trusting that emotional consistent, trusting that balance, and those sudden shifts in your tone, in your priorities, in your expectations absolutely create uncertainty. You see, credibility builds belief. Credibility builds belief. However, consistency builds security. And when they're secure, they're more likely to stand behind you and have your back. That it's that security that drives the backing of you. Yeah? So managing your emotions and being much more consistent is a great behavior for you to dial down into in your role as a leader. The 5th thing for us to look at is this: the gap that we talked about earlier. That gap often shows up in the energy, that you bring before the words. So you can see that gap, and we talk a lot about noticing what you're noticing. You can see that gap when you look, people in a meeting are polite, but their energy is really low. Or initiatives seem really slow to move. Everyone seemed to be excited at the meeting, and now it just seems to be moving slowly. And you're wondering exactly who has ownership of things, but there's no one's really taken ownership when you drill down. Feedback is limited, and the support that you're getting feels a bit conditional, like, people are standing back waiting to see what happens. Now, in my experience, often a leader will feel this before they can actually explain it. I just think something is a little bit off. And what I'm confident about is that for many leaders, that credibility gap is sensed. You can sense it usually well before it's spoken about. So this is where it comes back to noticing what you're noticing and looking at developing that self-awareness, reflecting on that to see, okay, what is actually going on here? Because what we know is that once you've named it, once you've called it out, you can then do something about it. So we've got one practical tool for you today, And this is a tool that you can apply immediately. This is why I give you these tools. You can apply them immediately. This is what I've called the commitment signal test. So what I'd encourage you to do this week is to shift your thinking so that instead of listening for agreement, so stop that listening for agreement, start watching for those commitment signals. What am I getting? Where's the energy? Where are the nods here? So test it out like this. After you communicate a direction or a decision, notice, are some people building on the idea or acknowledging it? Is that it? Are they building on it or are they acknowledging it? The commitment will come when they start to build on it. They're acknowledging it. They're just going, oh yeah, we're just doing what we're told. We're being compliant here. We're not going to do any more than that. And that's what you don't want. When you communicate that direction or the decision, are they taking some initiative? Are they getting excited about it? Are they bringing that energy? Or are they waiting for instructions as to what they should do next, and also just moving into that compliance space? We'll wait for you to tell us what to do, and then that's what we will do. Are they talking about this new direction or this decision? Are they referencing it later, or does it quietly fade away? So those are the kinds of things for you to actually notice once you've communicated that decision or that direction. And then this is you might want to write this one down. There's a question that it's useful for you to ask those present. And it's this one. What would full commitment to this look like from your perspective? What would full commitment to this look like from your perspective? Now, the reason, remembering you've communicated the idea, the decision or the directive, you've noticed what you're noticing to see whether they are getting excited about it or they're just, oh yeah, okay, here's another thing. When you ask this question, it does three things. It moves the people in the room from passive respect to active ownership because you're asking them what they think. It also helps to reveal any hidden hesitation that they might have pretty early on, which means that you can deal with that. And it positions you as expecting that alignment from them, not just agreement. So the backing grows when the leaders understand the gap between understanding and commitment and actively checking whether people are truly committed. So what you're doing here is you're opening the door for other questions. Questions like, what are you going to take ownership of here? Or where do you see there are any challenges? And that's what's really important. So the question that we're looking at is, what would full commitment to this look like from your perspective? And other questions that might come out of that, as I said, what are you going to take ownership of here? Or where do you see any challenges? What's critical is that you recognize that understanding doesn't drive action. It doesn't drive action on its own. A commitment to do what they're being asked to do does. So I hope that you find that tool a really useful one for you to use. Now, a deep reflection question. These are designed to help you with your self-awareness. And I believe all leadership stems from self-awareness, because when we're self-aware, we can lead ourselves, and that makes it easier for us to move on to leading others, to leading leaders, to leading a process, to leading the organization. So This is one deep reflection question. Ask it, come back to it. Write your responses, come back to it. Ask it, write some more responses, go away, come back to it. The deep reflection question is this: where might my competence be unintentionally creating distance instead of connection? Where might my competence be unintentionally creating distance instead of connection? Yeah, just sit with that and see what comes up. So, some key takeaways today: respect creates attention. Respect creates attention. Trust earns commitment. So all the time, trust outsmarts, or trust trumps rather. It outsmarts your intellect, your ability. And building relationships is really important. You can be respected. You want to be trusted as well, which is different from being liked. Now, there is a version of leadership that looks really successful from the outside, but it feels strangely like hard work on the inside. And you might be sitting in this at the moment. You prepare a whole lot, you explain more, you push more, but still decisions don't move quickly. Support feels conditional, and that momentum is something that you've got to go back and negotiate all the time. And we often experience that we're respected, but we're not fully backed. So the unspoken truth is that at a certain level, those influence gaps, they're no longer about the organization, they're no longer about the teams, they're actually about how your leadership is being experienced. And this isn't about your intention. This isn't about capability. This isn't about the impact. If you are consistently needing to reinforce your position, if you consistently need to restate your logic, or you've got to work harder than others to generate alignment, that's not a workplace issue. It may be a leadership presence issue. And ignoring that signal keeps many capable leaders sitting on a plateau for years. They're not able to take advantage of opportunities that might be there because they're kind of plateaued in this space. And it's got to do with their leadership presence. So if people agree with you, but they don't move with you, your leadership and the respect that you're looking for hasn't landed yet. So let's have a chat about building your influence and your authority. I'd love to do that with you if you're up for it. There's a QR code here on the screen that you can use, but we'll also put a link into the chat here. Use the link, use the QR code. Let's have a chat and see, because it could well be the very thing that moves you to that next level. Thank you so much for being here today. I've enjoyed sharing this with you. It's my pleasure to be here, and I'll see you next week. Bye now.